Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast brought to you by three aging millennials and our outdated opinions. I have covered a few of the more deplorable human beings to ever exist. Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Gary Ridgeway, to name a few. But it occurred to me that I have not talked about the most infamous female serial killer of all time, Aileen Wuornos. And if you, like me, want to know all of the details so you can hate these vile creatures as much as they deserve, then welcome to Corey's Killer Corner.
I got to come clean that I killed those 7 men in first-degree murder and robbery. As they said, they had it right. A serial killer. Not so much like thrill kill. I was into the robbing biz. I mean, serial killers are in this thrill killing jazz. I was into the robbing, and eliminate a witness. But still, then again, I got a number, so it's serial killer.
She is often referred to as the first female serial killer. She's actually not. There's a long history of women killing, starting with Elizabeth Bathory, known as the Blood Countess, a 16th century Hungarian noblewoman. She was a vampire-like figure who tortured and killed many young women, then bathed in their blood to maintain her youth and beauty. She has a very interesting story that I'd like to cover someday. And female killing goes all the way through the years with many Black Widow killers and wives poisoning their husbands or friends. But Aileen is the first high-profile woman killer who they said killed like a man. Aileen Carol Wuornos was born Aileen Pittman on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, was married at the age of 14 to Aileen's father, 18-year-old Leo Pittman. Less than a year after their marriage, Diane gave birth to Aileen's older brother Keith. And less than 2 years after their marriage, Diane got divorced from Leo a couple months before Aileen was even born. Aileen never met her father. Not that it was a bad thing. He was sentenced to life in prison in 1967 for the kidnapping and raping of a 7-year-old girl. So I doubt he would have been the influence that Aileen was missing in her life. He was also diagnosed with schizophrenia and committed suicide by hanging while in prison in 1969. Diane was beyond an unfit mother and decided that she couldn't do it either. So she packed up Aileen and Keith and dropped them off at her parents' house and was basically never seen again. Her grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos, legally adopted them in 1960, and they were no better off to be a role model than anyone else that came before them. They were both extreme alcoholics and very abusive. Aileen said in an interview that her grandfather was known to sexually assault and beat her as a child, and before he beat her, he would make her strip all of her clothes off. She would also admit to occasionally engaging in sexual activities with her brother Keith. It is important to note here that Aileen Wuornos is one of the most famous liars in all of history. So a lot of this came out of her mouth and can't 100% be trusted. But very late in her childhood, even early in teenhood, Aileen was very known for taking boys out into the woods and trading sexual favors for cigarettes. Sometimes as many as 4 or 5 at a time. She would occasionally try to take these sexual favors further into relationships, but pretty much none of the boys would want to admit what they did, which left her feeling abandoned all over again. She even had the nickname Cigarette Pig. At the age of 14, she got pregnant, and no one knew who the father was. There were multiple rumors surrounding this, and it was known to be either the town pedophile, a man that the neighborhood kids would call Chief. His house was a known party spot for the local teens. Another rumor was a close friend of her grandfather's who would occasionally rape her, or even her grandfather himself. but no one really knows for sure. While pregnant, she moved away from her grandparents' home and had the baby, and then she did maybe one of the only good things this woman ever did in her life. She gave the baby up for adoption. After the baby was fully out of her life, she moved home. But when she arrived, her grandfather told her that she wasn't allowed back in the house. So she moved into the woods at the end of the street, where she would remain for years. She still went to school for a little while, which may be the weirdest thing of all, but she was an extreme troublemaker. She was constantly sneaking off with boys, smoking in the school, and mouthing off to teachers. She lasted into her 9th grade year, and then she dropped out. When Aileen was 16, her grandmother died. She showed up to the funeral in a dirty shirt and blue jeans, walked up to the casket, lit a cigarette, and blew smoke right in her grandmother's face. And just as a side note, she switched the men and women's bathroom signs just for fun. She was promptly removed from the funeral home. This death did seem to affect her a little bit. Because of all the people in her life, her grandmother was the only one who kind of treated her like a human. And that's very little bit. She was still not a good person. She ignored all of the abuse that Aileen and Keith went through their entire lives. After her grandmother passed, this is when she started her life of traveling around the country and prostituting herself for money. In May of 1974, Aileen was arrested in Colorado for a DUI, disorderly conduct, and discharging a weapon from a moving vehicle. But she skipped town before she did any time. Around the same time, Aileen claims that she found a decapitated body under a bridge and reported it to a truck driver, and the truck driver did not care and just drove off. Nobody really knows if this has anything to do with all of the killings that Aileen committed, because it was years before she committed any of hers, but some speculate it could have maybe given her the confidence to kill, knowing that bodies are just lying around and nobody seems to care, because that's how she went about her murders. She just committed them and didn't even think anything would come of it. Also in 1974, Aileen's grandfather committed suicide by gassing himself in the garage, but Aileen, understandably, did not attend his funeral. In 1976, Aileen hitchhiked to Florida, where she met 69-year-old Millionaire Yacht Club president Louis Gratz Fell. They were married very quickly, and it was happily ever after. Just kidding. That's not how this story goes at all. She could have done quite well with this man, but she let her abusive past warp her mind, and she sabotaged the relationship in dramatic Aileen fashion. She continually involved herself in confrontations at their local bar and went to jail briefly for assault. She also once beat Fell half to death with his own cane, causing him to get a restraining order against her within weeks of the marriage. After this event, Louis Fell quickly annulled the marriage, and Aileen was once again on her own. This is when she returned to Michigan, where on July 14, 1976, she was arrested at Bernie's Club and charged with assault and disturbing the peace for throwing a cue ball at a bartender's head. 4 days later, her brother Keith died of esophageal cancer, which left Aileen with $10,000 from his life insurance, which in today's money is over $50,000. If you play it right, that is a life-changing amount of money for any normal person. She used this money to pay off a couple fines. She bought a luxury vehicle, which she crashed a couple weeks after buying it, and all within a few months, she was broke again. In 1978, at the age of 22, Aileen attempted suicide by shooting herself in the stomach. According to her, between the ages of 14 and 22, she attempted to commit suicide 6 different times. Nobody knows whether or not she even ever attempted it once, because nobody could find any signs of being shot in the stomach. But I will say this, given the childhood and young adult life she had, I tend to believe that maybe she did try at least. Suicidal thoughts and tendencies can affect anyone, regardless of your upbringing or background. But it is no secret that it especially affects people who have had an abusive, neglectful, or violent childhood. I personally have gone there in my head, even strongly considered that no one would miss me, and they'd be better off with me not around. I couldn't have been more wrong. If anyone out there is feeling this way, and you don't have anyone to turn to, There is a number you can call to help you through these moments. Simply dial 988 and a professional can talk you through these feelings. It gives you that ear to listen to, not judge, and make you feel validated. With my quick tangent out of the way, back to the episode. By 1981, Aileen moved back to Daytona, Florida, where she started dating a man named David Watts, a 52-year-old auto worker. They were doing good for about 2 months, and then Aileen did what she does best. She went crazy and blew up on David. So on May 20th, 1981, Aileen got drunk on whiskey and pills, put on a bikini, and robbed a convenience store, where she stole 2 packs of cigarettes and $35 in cash. As you can see, her crimes at this point have been pretty minuscule and of the boring variety. Trust me, she does not stay this way. After robbing the convenience store, she was arrested stumbling down the street, drunk and high. This apparently was all a cry for attention. She thought that David would come and bail her out and be her knight in shining armor. That did not work. She did 1 year in prison for this crime, and then after her release in 1984, she was arrested for forging checks. Then in 1985, she was arrested for trying to steal a revolver and ammunition. It's important to note that Aileen was known to go by many aliases over the years to try and hide from her criminal record. Names like Sandra Kretsch, Cammie Green, and Lori Grody. Now on January 4th, 1986, Aileen was arrested in Miami and charged with car theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice for providing identification bearing her aunt's name. Miami police officers found a .38 caliber revolver and a box of ammunition in the stolen car. As you can see, she is starting to amp up her crimes. On June 2nd, 1986, she was detained and questioned after a male friend accused her of pulling a gun on him in his car and trying to get $200. When they brought her in, she had a pocket full of ammunition, but no gun. They found that ammunition did match the gun under the passenger seat of the car she was in with that friend. In 1986, Aileen was now 30. This is when she met 24-year-old Tyra Moore at a gay bar in Daytona, Florida. They quickly fell in love and moved in together. They spent 4 years together, with Aileen mostly supporting them with her robberies and prostitution. They went back and forth between living in the woods, getting hotel rooms for the night, and occasionally having an apartment to stay in until their rent lapsed and they were kicked out. Tyra had no criminal record and no history of criminal activity, and she also had a job as a hotel maid that barely got her by. And now, the ultimate ramp up in crime. With her prostitution starting to diminish a bit, she wasn't quite the young, charming woman she used to be. This is where Aileen truly went off the rails and found a new lifestyle. She became the true blue definition of a drifter killer, killing 7 men in the span of 12 months. These are those men. On November 30th, 1989, Aileen met and killed 50-year-old Richard Mallory, an electronics store owner in Clearwater. He picked her up somewhere in Daytona on the side of the road hitchhiking. They drove to where she said she was going, and they decided they weren't done with their night, so they cracked open some alcoholic beverages and had a good time. Then, Aileen initiated a sex for money exchange. Next, she claimed that Mallory beat, raped, and sodomized her after he drove her to an abandoned area for sexual services. Aileen claims that she fought her way out of the vehicle kicking and screaming and turned a gun on him and shot him dead behind the truck. Mallory was Eileen's first victim, and she claimed to have killed him in self-defense. Of course, she admitted later in life, after she was convicted, that she made all of that up. It was consensual for money, and she just killed him to rob him.
From the beginning, did you know that you were going to kill them when they picked you up in their cars?
I pretty much had them selected that they were going to die.
So there was no self-defense?
No, there was no self-defense. I'm being really straight up about everything. There's no self-defense. I'm really sorry what happened about everything. I was in this. To me, this world is nothing but evil, and all of us are full of evil one way or another.
2 days after the murder, a deputy sheriff found Mallory's abandoned vehicle. The driver's side seat was covered in blood and riddled with bullet holes. On December 13th, his body was found several miles away in a wooded area. He had been shot several times, and 2 bullets to the left lung were found to have been the cause of his death. The police were a tiny bit suspicious about her story when she was finally caught, because of the driver's side being covered in blood and riddled with bullet holes. If she fought her way out and killed him behind the truck, how did that happen? It is important to note here that Mallory was no saint. He had his own history of violence and criminal activities. When he was 19, he was arrested for sexual assault when he broke into a woman's house and started groping her. He did 4 years in prison and got out registered as an offender for 10 years. But here's where it gets complicated. While Mallory was in prison, and after he underwent extreme psychological care and therapy to reform himself, he was well known in his neighborhood as a decent guy, and the prostitutes who he frequented never reported him for violence or anything of that nature. Tyra told investigators later that she remembers Aileen admitting to his first murder, and she thought it was weird that she didn't have any bruises or scratches or anything on her. This first murder made her realize that if she just lured these men in, she could take everything they have and sell it. To her, it was a way to make money and survive. It wasn't murder, because all men were monsters and they all deserved to die. On May 19th, 1990, 47-year-old David Spears, a construction worker in Winter Garden, was reported missing. Aileen claims that Spears picked her up on the side of the road hitchhiking. He told Aileen along the way that he was going to visit his separated wife and daughter for her birthday. He also told her, for her gift, he had a large amount of money. That was a mistake. She claims that she offered him sex for money, and he took her 80 miles out of the way and went to a remote area and they started fooling around. She says that he asked her to get out and get in the bed of the truck, and when she went back there, he got violent and attempted to rape her. She then turned the gun on him and shot him to death. On June 1st, his naked body was found along US 19 in Citrus County. He had been shot 6 times with a .22 caliber pistol. They also found a used condom near his body, which indicates they had sex. Even though Aileen claims they never did, this is one of the biggest mysteries in all of her murders. It's well known that she would go home after these killings and brag about it to Tyra. It is unclear to this day how okay Tyra was with this, but it was known that she could take care of herself and she was not afraid of Aileen. So whether or not she went with her on these killings is not the point. She knew about all of it and she did nothing. That makes her just as complicit in my opinion. On May 31st, 1990, Aileen killed 40-year-old rodeo worker Charles Karskadden. Again, she was picked up hitchhiking. She claims that she got him into the back of his Cadillac and shot him. The body had been wrapped in an electrical blanket and was badly decomposed by the time they found it. Aileen claims that she found a gun in the backseat of his car, which proved he was going to kill her. And in her mind, I think she believed that. Witnesses saw Aileen in possession of Charles's car, and she had pawned the gun identified as belonging to Charles. On June 6th, his naked body was found in Pasco County. He had been shot 9 times with a .22 caliber weapon. Also in June of 1990, 65-year-old retired merchant seaman and Christian mercenary Peter Seams left Jupiter, Florida for Arkansas. He picked up hitchhiking Aileen to offer her a ride on the way. She pulled a gun on him and forced him out of the car. This is where she presumably robbed and murdered him on the side of the road. His body was unfortunately never found. And on July 4th, Aileen and Tyra wrecked his car while on a drinking bender in Orange Springs, Florida, in a suburban neighborhood. Some neighbors saw what happened and came out to help. Aileen was noted as saying, "Please don't call the cops, please don't call the cops." They were both seen fleeing from the wrecked vehicle by the 2 people who came to help. Eileen's handprints were also found on the interior door handle. This is the first time someone had witnessed Aileen doing anything, and the 2 citizens were able to describe the women in great detail. The sketches were made, and they now had a profile of who to be looking for. On July 31st, 1990, 50-year-old sausage salesman Troy Burris was reported missing in Ocala, Florida. His truck was found the very next day, but his body would not be found for another month. He was found in a wooded area in Marion County, badly decomposed. He had been shot twice. He was so badly decomposed that they could only identify him by his wedding ring. On September 11th, 1990, Aileen killed 56-year-old retired United States Air Force Major Dick Humphreys. The very next day, his body was found by a couple of kids in Marion County. He was fully clothed, his pockets were turned inside out, and he had been shot 7 times in the torso, and for the first time ever, in the back of the head, as if she executed him. This is a clear sign of escalating your kills as a serial killer. His car was found counties away. Not only was she killing these men, but she was shooting them several times, and she even reloaded a clip once. It shows anger, hate, and overkill. She was clearly a very vengeful person. And now for her last kill. On November 19th, 1990, she killed 61-year-old Walter Antonio. He was a truck driver, security guard, and reserve police officer. Antonio's nearly naked body was found near a remote logging road in Dixie County. He had been shot 4 times. 5 days later, his car was found counties away. Now, with the first 3 murders, investigators were not connecting any of them because they were spread counties apart, and counties tend not to talk to each other about these kind of things. But with the last 4 pretty close to each other, they figured out it was most likely a serial killer. However, the fact that it was a woman was not even on their radar. That was just not a thing that happened a lot at the time. But Detective Steve Weniger did say that the murders were most likely committed by somebody they picked up on the road. Mind you, this was the 90s, so hitchhiking wasn't done nearly as much as it used to be. Nobody really picked up men anymore, so it was more likely to be a woman, posing as a damsel in distress and needing help. Weniger was the first to start assuming that, so kudos to that man. But after the murder of Walter, Aileen was spotted at a pawn shop and identified from the sketches put out by police. And when you pawn things in Florida, you have to give a thumbprint. But Aileen thought she was fine, because she used her alias, Cammie Green. But they added that to the thumbprint found in Mallory's car, and it matched. But the name that came up was Lori Grody, so the police had to dig a bit, and they found out that those names were aliases used in multiple cities, and they all belonged to a one Aileen Wuornos. At this time, Tyra caught wind of the sketches that were put out of her and Aileen, so she was becoming more and more scared of this life and decided to move home to Ohio to live with her parents. Investigators got calls and tips from citizens around the area that the sketches looked a whole lot like these 2 wild women that frequented the bars around there, Aileen and Tyra. One of the most frequented sleazy biker bars was called the Last Resort Bar. So on January 9th, 1991, 2 undercover officers found Aileen downtown and followed her to her last resort. She drank all night until she passed out right outside the bar. When she woke up in the morning, she was promptly arrested and brought in under one of her aliases. Now that the police had her in custody, they needed to build their case. Part of that plan was to go to Ohio and grill Tyra about how much she knew. Tyra admitted to being able to stop her more than once, but never doing it, even though she should have. Tyra made herself a deal, though. She told police that she would help them set up Aileen through phone calls in exchange for immunity. Through a series of calls, Tyra got Aileen to spill everything. But during these confessions, Aileen seemed to want to keep Tyra out of trouble, whether because of love or a sense of protection or whatever it was. Aileen didn't incriminate Tyra during these calls.
I'm gonna have to, because I'm like gonna go to jail for something that you did. This isn't fair. My family is a nervous wreck up there. My mom has been calling me all the time. She doesn't know what the hell's going on.
I'm not gonna let you go to jail. If I have to confess everything just to keep you from getting in trouble, I will.
Okay.
Now, to me personally, I think Tyra was fully complicit in a lot of Eileen's crimes, and she never wanted her to stop. I think she was okay with what Aileen was doing because it was providing a life for them. And then when the sketches came out, she got spooked, ran, and eventually turned. Aileen did get into a room with investigators to confess, but what she did was string them along on all kinds of boo-hoo, I'm the victim kind of stories. She told them about her childhood, and because of her violent upbringing, she became a violent person. And every one of those men attacked her. It was weighing heavy on the families that in the media, their loved ones were being portrayed as somebody who would pick up a traveling prostitute. But Aileen admitted in court that she lured most of them in by telling them that her car broke down and she needed a ride. So there is a chance that a few of these men were just good citizens trying to help a lady in need.
And what about with Richard Mallory? Because you gave that testimony with Richard Mallory.
Yeah, Richard Mallory was not self-defense. Richard Mallory I killed, and I needed his wheels to move the stuff, and he had the right amount of money I needed to move into the apartment, so.
But what about the testimony that you gave in court about?
That's just the lies, like I was saying.
About the Visine and...
I was just doing a lying biz. That was just my lying gig, try to beat the system.
I don't know which one is more sad. Thinking your father or husband tried to sleep with a prostitute and got killed? Or that they were just being a nice person and she was a psychopath who murdered them for money. Just a month after her arrest, Aileen sold the rights to her story and likeness for movies and TV, because her story was worth a ton of money. Being the first big female serial killer, she ended up with a deal of $60 per month for the rest of her life, which in prison money is way too good of a living for this douchebag. In 1992, the first TV movie about Aileen was made. It was called Overkill: The Aileen Wuornos Story, an extremely romanticized version of the events that occurred, as Hollywood is wont to do. It was followed over the next decade by a couple more TV movies and one major Hollywood film, Monster, starring Charlize Theron as Aileen and Christina Ricci as Tyra. This one poured on the charm for Aileen and made her almost a sympathetic character instead of the monster she truly was. If you can get past that, though, it's a very well-acted movie. I strongly suggest it. While in prison, she was also put through the psychopathy checklist, which is the test to show whether or not a person is a psychopath. The highest score you can get is a 40. If you are anywhere from 30 to 40 points, you are considered a psychopath. She scored a 32, which apparently for women is extremely high. 1 year after her arrest, she stood trial for the murder of her first victim, Richard Mallory. She again took the stand and gave her story that he attacked her. Said she could tell he was going to just play with her and play with her and play with her and then kill her. She had to do everything alone in this trial. She had no character witnesses whatsoever. Even Tyra testified against her and told everyone that she came to her after killing Richard Mallory and admitted to it.
We were sitting on the floor watching TV, and she just come out and said, I have something to tell you. And I asked her what, and she said that she had shot and killed a man that day.
She loved you, didn't she?
Yes.
She said she'd do anything for you, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And in order for her to say what you wanted her to, you lied to her, right?
Yes.
It was in fact much more than a couple of times, wasn't it?
It could have been.
In January 1992, the court finds her guilty of capital murder. She was visibly unhappy and crazed. She stood up, pushed her chair back, and said, "Scumbags of America," and walked out of the courtroom. The irony seemed to be lost on her that she is probably one of the biggest scumbags in American history. During her sentencing, the judge went as hard as he possibly could on her. He did not like her. He sentenced her to be killed by the electric chair. In a 2001 petition to the Florida Supreme Court, she stated her intention to dismiss her legal counsel and terminate all pending appeals. She said, "I killed those men, robbed them as cold as ice, and I'd do it again too. There's no chance in keeping me alive or anything, because I'd kill again. I have hate crawling through my system. I am so sick of hearing this "she's crazy" stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again. While her attorneys argued that she was not mentally competent to make such a request, Aileen insisted that she knew what she was doing, and a court-appointed panel of psychiatrists agreed. In 2002, Aileen began accusing prison matrons of tainting her food with dirt, saliva, and even urine. She said she had overheard conversations among prison personnel, trying to get me so pushed over the brink by them I'd wind up committing suicide before the execution, and wishing to rape me before the execution. She also complained of strip searches, tight handcuffing, door kicking, frequent window checks, low water pressure, mildew on her mattress, and catcalling in distaste and pure hatred towards me. Aileen threatened to boycott showers and food trays when certain officers were on duty. In the meantime, my stomach's growling away and I'm taking showers through the sink of my cell. Her attorney stated, "Miss Wuornos really just wants to have proper treatment, humane treatment, until the day she's executed. She believes what she's written." I feel slightly bad for her lawyer. I've seen a few interviews with him. He seems like he knows what she did and didn't want to have to represent her. But he still went in there with the defense. The defense she told him she wanted and the way she wanted it done. And he had to deal with her the entire time. In the weeks leading up to her execution, Aileen gave a series of interviews to documentarian Nick Broomfield. She said, "I am being taken away to meet God and Jesus and the angels and whatever is beyond the beyond." In her final interview, she once again stated that her mind was tortured in prison, and her head was crushed by sonic pressure. Food poisonings and other abuses worsened. She said each time she complained, they made her appear insane or to drive her insane. She also turned on her interviewer at one point. She said, "You sabotaged my ass. Society and the cops and the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies and shit." Her final on-camera words were, "Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass."
The cops knew who I was. After Richard Mallory died, I left prints everywhere, and they covered it up and let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. I know they did, because I was no professional serial killer or anything. I'm a murderer or whatever you want to call it, you know.
But you're okay now.
I'm okay. I'm okay. God is going to be there. Jesus Christ is going to be there. All the angels and everything. And, you know, whatever's on the beyond, I think it's going to be more like Star Trek, beaming me up into a space vehicle, man. Then I move on, recolonize to another planet or whatever. But it's whatever's the beyond, I know it's going to be good because I didn't do anything as wrong as they said. I did the right thing. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Hey, I was tortured at VCI. They had the intercom on in the room, and they kept lying that it wasn't on. And they were using sonic pressure on my head since 1997.
And do you think, did that affect your mind, do you think?
Huh?
Did that affect your mind in some way, the sonic?
It was crushing my head, and they were using sonic pressure. Every meeting I had, she increased the pressure of the volume of the comm, increased the harassment on the floor, increased the trays being inedible, just increased every bit of my complaints and trashed all grievances. They're trying to make it look like I was crazy at all times, rig up the room with torture. If I said anything about I think their whole plan was to try to make it look like I was totally crazy. Yeah, thanks a lot. I lost my fucking life because of it. Couldn't even get a fair trial. Couldn't even get a fair investigation or nothing. Couldn't even have my appeals right. You sabotaged my ass, society, and the cops, and the system. A raped woman got executed. It was used for books and movies and shit. I'm leaving. I'm glad. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass. Okay, let's go.
By the time her execution was set up in Florida, the electric chair was no longer legal. so she was set to die by lethal injection on October 9th, 2002. She declined her last meal, which could have been anything under $20, and instead she received a cup of black coffee. Her last words were, "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day, with Jesus. June 6th, I like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back." I think she mixed like 4 movies in that quote. I don't know exactly what she was saying there, but it's a lot of incoherent bullshit. That's what Aileen was known for. But Aileen Wuornos is a complete unknown. If her childhood is anything like she explained it, then it is possible she eventually snapped because she hates humans that much. But she lied a lot, maybe even up to the last moment of admitting she killed everyone just for money. We will never know the full truth. This woman was an absolute monster, and I believe she killed for fun. She was enjoying the money and the items she got from these men, and that formed a lifestyle that you just can't keep up with forever. It eventually will catch up with you, just like it did for Aileen Wuornos. Thank you all for joining me today. Don't be afraid to reach out to a loved one if you're having a tough time, and let's help each other as much as we can. Thank you for listening.